Hi, everyone, and welcome to the Facebook Live presentation on resiliency from the Partnership for Public Service. My name is Virginia Hill, and I'm a senior manager here at the Partnership. We're a nonprofit, nonpartisan organization that aims to make government more effective for the American people. And as we all know, we're experiencing a partial government shutdown right now. So we really wanted to go on air with you all to talk a little bit about how the shutdown is affecting people and what can we do to be more resilient at these difficult times. So please engage with us, ask us your questions. You can start to do so immediately. We're going to have a Q&A portion at the end, but please start commenting and asking your questions right away so that we can start to address what you're interested in. As I mentioned, my name is Ginny Hill. I work here at the Partnership, but I'm also a former federal employee. I started my career at the National Institutes of Health as a presidential management fellow, and I lived through the shutdown of 2013, which I know is still in our recent memories. And so I'm really excited to talk about this topic. And I am joined by Mika Cross. She's the VP for Employee Engagement and Strategic Initiatives at Flex Jobs, an Army veteran and a former Fed as well. So I'll give you a chance to introduce yourself to everyone.
Thank you so much, Jenny, and hi, everybody. Not so long ago, I was a federal employee myself. In fact, in April of 2018, I hit my 20 years of service. That combined uniform service and public service, and I worked all throughout government, from the intelligence community to the Department of Agriculture to the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau and Department of Labor, among others. In 2013, as you were mentioning, I went through my first real shutdown myself. I had two young children. I was a single mother. I had landed in DC after 9/11 when I was still stationed in the United States Army, so I didn't have family here, and it was a very uncertain time. What's nice is my work in government really encompassed helping to engage employees and institute supportive workplace policies and programs that really help get your best from employees no matter how, when, and where you work, all across the federal government. So I'm really happy to share my experience and also some really key resources and tools that I think will help you get through this trying time.
That's great. Thanks so much, Mika, for
Thanks.
joining us. So many of you guys are starting to feel the impact, if you haven't already, on day one of this partial government shutdown. At the Partnership, we truly recognize that shutting down all or part of the government is a disservice to the American people. There are 800,000 federal employees who are directly impacted by the lack of agency funding. And that doesn't count contractors or the other services that kind of surround government, not just inside DC, outside the Beltway and across the country. That's 800,000 people specifically who don't know when or if their next paycheck is coming. And so it goes without saying that the Partnership stands with these federal employees, and we're here to understand your concerns, to have your voice heard. Again, that's one of the reasons why we wanted to have this Facebook dialogue, to understand what's going on for federal employees and all of those affected by the partial shutdown. When government does eventually reopen and the shutdown eventually ends, furloughed employees are going to have to be able to be reintegrated into the workforce, be able to refocus on the mission. We also have to think about the people who were not furloughed, who continued to work, whether with or without pay. And that just brings to mind how important this topic of resiliency, mitigating stress, and staying optimistic at times like this so that we can bounce back. So let's get to our topic, which is resiliency. My favorite article on this topic comes from Diane Kutu from the Harvard Business Review. And we use that in our resilience workshop here at the Partnership. So I just want to give a little bit of a summary on that to just kind of jumpstart our dialogue. The basic definition of resilience that we use is an essential capability to bounce back. And we can all relate to this idea of going through a hardship, going through a difficult time or event, and the desire to bounce back. Sometimes, though, it's not about bouncing back to where you were. It's actually about just recovering from what happened, learning from it, moving through it, as opposed to moving on. Certain things that we go through in life are, they might be considered character building, but truly they change who we are. And it's the type of thing where resiliency might have a different meaning for different people, but that's our basic definition, is an essential capability to bounce back. The good news is, too, is that resilience can be learned and practiced. In fact, it should be. You're not born resilient or not. This is the type of thing you can learn, practice, and get good at throughout your lifetime. So, in her article, Diane Kutu writes about 3 essential ingredients for resilience. So, I want to share those with everyone and then also just add my own little 2 cents on there because I think it's an important fourth ingredient. Okay, so the first one is a staunch acceptance of reality. So, resilient people are not in denial of reality, they're not wishing things were different or wasting their energy lamenting the past. They stay away from blaming and complaining about what's going on and really focus on the here and now. What is going on in my reality? What do I know to be true? What do I not know? And seeing that setback or that uncertainty as a normal way of being. Seeing a setback or a problem or a roadblock as a normal part of being alive and recognizing that they're able to have autonomy over deciding now what. So that's the first ingredient, is a staunch acceptance of reality. The second one is a belief that life is meaningful. And here's where we're going to get really deep, Mika. But for this one, resilient people really see that they can learn from just about anything. That even in the hardest of times, there's something that they can learn, something that it's trying to teach them. And that's really, really important. This is different, though, than optimism or trying to paint a silver lining on something. That has its value, that has its time and place. But this part of resilience is not so much about painting a rosier picture, but instead recognizing that whatever is has something to teach me. In her article, she talks about Viktor Frankl's book, A Man's Search for Meaning, which many of you have probably read, talking about his hardships and barely surviving concentration camps. But I also think about keynote speakers I've seen throughout the years, athletes who become paralyzed or their career completely changes, and they have to find a way to learn from it and move through. So the third ingredient is an ability to improvise. So, and you're going to be able to teach us all about flexibility in just a minute, but this one kind of speaks to the importance of flexibility. Being able to improvise and recognize that in the moment you can find an opportunity. You probably have interacted with those people, and maybe they're around you right now, those negative people who are saying, who are blaming and complaining. They're stuck in the past and focused on what they can't do. Resilient people are able to improvise in the moment and try to focus on what they can do, what they do have control over, instead of being paralyzed by fear or negativity. Okay, last one, and this is the one I get to add because I've really studied and felt passion for this topic on resilience. And I believe the fourth ingredient needs to be a mindfulness practice or some kind of a self-care practice. It's very easy in difficult times like this to self-sacrifice, but you're going to feel that later. Focusing on at least one thing a day that you can do for just yourself to take care of your own stress levels, to just frankly make you happy or have fun, something to help you practice being in the moment. That's really what mindfulness is all about, as many of you know. It's just practicing being present, as opposed to letting our mind spin out of control about what's going to happen in the future or lamenting the past. So I think mindfulness, practicing being present, or any other self-care that you think you need to do is extremely important and has to be a priority during this partial shutdown. Okay, so those are your 4 ingredients, and I'm really excited to get Mika's take on this. So I want to turn it over to you to discuss a little bit about what people can be doing for their own well-being at this time.
Yeah, and great points, Jenny. I really love the 4 big points that you honed in on. And if there's one thing that I learned from the last shutdown, it was just how much of my self-identity was tied to my work. And as you know, federal employees are extremely tied to the mission. In fact, the Federal Employee Viewpoint Survey, year after year, shows just how mission-driven our fellow federal employees really are. They care deeply about the work that we do on behalf of the nation. And so when that was taken away without a choice of being able to go back, for me, it was really, really an eye-opener. And it caused me to take pause and think about some of those elements that you just touched on, But also, how was I going to redefine myself without work every day? I remember not sleeping well and waking up in the mornings, looking at the news, trying to figure out if we were going back. Are we? Are we not? I'd go to
Yeah.
sleep looking at the news, and then I'd wake up looking at the news. Until a couple days in, I decided, you know what? I'm going to take pause right now and just really do an inventory, a self inventory. But this idea of self care, I think, is something really, really key and important as well. Because you can't do or be well for others in your life that you care about, your family, your friends, your community, your churches, where you volunteer, if you don't take care of number one first. And so, a couple of places you could start. I thought I'd give a few resources
Yeah.
that we could be thinking about. Number one is tap into your FHFB benefits, your healthcare benefits. I had Blue Cross Blue Shield. You could use any of them, but give them a call. See what might be available. A number of federal healthcare benefits offer free gym memberships or discounted gym memberships. You could start there if you're not already enrolled in a wellness class. See what they have to offer. Go check out your local gym or yoga studio. That might be a great place to start. You could also start taking some of those annual assessments, those healthcare assessments. I know I'm guilty of not completing them each and every year, but sometimes they even offer like a little economic incentive, like $25 or something for each one that you
Yeah.
take. You could start taking that and also use it as a baseline for maybe setting some health goals that would be wellness related for 2019. Another thing you might consider is tapping into your employee assistance program. Now, some agencies' EAPs may not be functional right now, but it's a great way to find out what's available. Go on the website, whether it's Work Life for You or FOH, Federal Occupational Health. A lot of those employee assistance programs offer deeply discounted services, financial help, legal help, and even free counseling for different issues and areas in your life. It doesn't have to be related to the shutdown. But it's a great place to start and it's a great place to lean on. And a lot of those websites, especially through the Employee Assistance Program, have great webinars, online learning, skills assessments, and those kinds of things that you can tap into right away. So that's just
That's
a few
awesome.
places to start with.
That's great. I just love the idea, kind of going back to the ingredients of
Mm-hmm.
resilience, asking yourself, I'm here, now what? And looking at some options, some very practical things that we can do with our time, with our energy, while we're not at work. Okay, great. So you had just gave us a little teaser about like learning and development,
Yeah.
and I like to nerd out about leadership
Yes,
development.
of course.
The partnership has a ton of programs for leaders or aspiring leaders who want to improve their careers and their leadership skills. So, what are some things, even when they're not at work, that people could be doing to further their professional development?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I think it's obviously really timely and important. So, some things you could be doing is looking for some free assessments, some free skills assessments. Take a deep dive of where you're at. Too often we get so busy ingrained in the everyday, day to day mission of our jobs that we don't have time to really focus on ourselves. Maybe think back to your most recent performance appraisal last year, your IDP. Think about what your learning objectives are and sit down for a while. There are so many free or low cost resources that are out
Yeah.
there that you could start with. You could go to your local library and see what kind of career connections are available. The Department of Labor offers a lot of free online resources as well. Career One Stop is one of them, where you're able to either go online or download the app or go into a Career One Stop resource center and see what they have to offer. It's a really great time for you to also think about where could you lend your skill elsewhere in the community. Maybe connect with your local, state, or county government to see if there are there opportunities to shadow. Are there opportunities to volunteer? Could you connect with a part-time, intermittent, or gig contract kind of work that's temporary in order to bridge the gap and get some supplemental income until you get your next paycheck? Just a number of things to think about. And it's always nice to take a little look see at the civilian labor market and what are the job trends across the nation. There are a number of federal opportunities coming out with regards to upskilling and reskilling your current skill set. Is IT, tech, cyber, or STEM something you'd often consider, but maybe you're an HR professional and hadn't thought about it before? What kinds of offerings are in the community for you to be able to get some new skill sets or test something out and just see what it's like? Could open a whole wide range of opportunities career wise when you get back to work, both within your agencies and further down the line throughout your career.
That's so exciting, and I'm just getting like excited just thinking about that. Um, And I know for some people, the difficulty is when you're out of your routine, right? So you don't have a place to go first thing in the morning, right? Maybe your childcare or these other commitments that you have, your schedule starts to change and shift. So, any thoughts, especially from the shutdown that we both went through, or other experiences of how just people can stay sharp, you know?
Yeah, I really like the idea of a routine. It was important for me to have an anchor. So personally, my anchor was the gym. I made sure that I stayed connected. I had a little goal. And you might think about goal setting. I mean, January is a perfect time.
Yeah.
It's new year, new you kind of theory in what some goals could be and how could you bake in some structure to your current routine. And also, what might be some other kinds of goals personally? Like, for instance, is it time to take inventory of your beneficiary forms? Do you need to update them? Maybe a living will, financial resources, as we talked about before, and maybe setting some time against your calendar to achieve those goals as you're moving forward. Connecting with remote jobs also could be a great opportunity, especially if they offer part time or flexible hours in the evenings or on weekends. You could connect with a wide variety of employers who offer so many different kinds of occupations. I saw the Coast Guard had come out with a memo most recently suggesting that they could find supplemental income through mystery shopping or selling off goods at a yard sale. Well, you can go one better. There's many resources out there to connect with other kinds of intermittent, seasonal, part-time, temporary, and remote kinds of work to keep you busy and occupied while you're off.
Yeah, and I think acknowledging the uncertainty is important, right? I think that could be kind of paralyzing for some
Yeah.
people. So just to think, well, we could go back to work tomorrow. So why should I go search for that, you know?
Yeah.
The idea is you have the time. Oftentimes we complain that we don't have the time, you know? So now is essentially an opportunity to go, what have I always been wanting to do?
Hmm.
Yes, I'm not sure when I'm going to return back to work. I think that's probably the biggest hurdle is just the uncertainty,
The
right?
uncertainty.
So acknowledge the uncertainty. Don't fight against it or resist it. Again, that's part of the first ingredient of resilience, acknowledging reality. Yes, I don't know when I'm going to be going back to work. And here are like a few priorities that I want to make for
Yeah.
myself. And maybe even sorting the priorities in terms of short term, medium term, long term.
Hmm.
Because we don't know when the shutdown will end, um, if you can kind of prioritize in terms of short term, a couple days, what do I want to do within the next couple days? Medium term, what do I want to, if this persists for a few more weeks, what do I want to do? And then hopefully not, but if we're talking more long term, what are some of the things that I really know I need to do for myself, especially financially? I think that's what we've heard a lot
Yeah.
from people is that that really is kind of the looming concern. So if it helps you to kind of acknowledge the uncertainty and then sort out some activities or ideas in terms of the near term as well as the long term.
Yeah, and I think it's important also to acknowledge the impact on our loved ones, our family and friends too. As I mentioned, when I went through the big shutdown in 2013, my children were really young and they were really stressed out hearing about this in the news. And mommy is not at work. And is mommy going to get a paycheck? And are we going to have a house? And they were asking those kinds of really hard questions. So I think like coming up with some strategies to address it with the people that love and care about you also, because we realize in this economy that many households are dual income households, many households are single households too, and single parents or caregivers or in the sandwich generation balancing both caring for young children as well as other family members. And so just trying to think about being gentle to yourself but also how you're going to broach these kinds of conversations. And again, some of those resources that we talked about earlier through your employee assistance program, through your healthcare benefits, through community resources could be really helpful navigating through some of these really tough issues to talk about.
Yeah, and talking about them with fellow feds
Hmm.
who are furloughed or not, or other resources like our organizations who are supporting feds
Yeah.
and whatnot. I just think you don't have to do it alone. Sometimes we think we have to have it together and like, well, I don't want to complain because all these other people are going through the same thing. You can lean on each other. I know of at least one federal employee who's furloughed who started a Facebook support group
Yeah.
just to connect people. You may not be able to use your work email, but you could still connect as humans on your personal time through social media or
Hmm.
at a coffee shop or again maybe at a library. We're gonna like have a book club or something like anything where it may sound simple, but it's something just again to maximize your time so you feel productive. Um, and you still have that connection to your personal development and maybe even the mission of your organization, because that's what I think what could hurt the most is if people get disengaged from the mission, and if the American people see that these agencies can be shut down for weeks at a time, and then what happens, right? There is a big consequence to not just the employees themselves, which it really is the audience we're looking at today, but at the same time, we have to think about all the taxpayers who fund these organizations who are affected by not getting services, or not being able to engage with the valuable jobs that federal people do. So that's kind of the ripple effect that we're looking at from this partial shutdown.
And sometimes we forget that 85% of federal workers reside outside of the nation's capital. So these are places in hometown USA and in my rural hometown state of Maine and areas across the country where, federal employment are really viable ways and a means to help economic growth and community development. And so it affects all of us. It affects all of us. And it's interesting, we talked a little bit about the flexibility piece. And I think part of resiliency is thinking about how to be flexible in your reintegration and your approach in reengaging the employees when they come back to work. And so equally important is to consider how your approach will be, both to the engagement for yourselves as you reintegrate into work and what that might look like. But if you're a supervisor or a manager, how are you going to leverage the flexibilities at hand to help support workers get back on their feet and back into routine and as quick as possible back into the jobs of their everyday lives? I know that last shutdown, many managers were inclined to say, okay, back to work it is, and guess what? No telework for the next 30 days. That hit home, and it really did affect morale because consider not only the financial implications, but the disruption to the routine and just being able to be thoughtful and considerate and kind with the kinds of flexibilities that we have, whether it be financial resources, whether it be workplace flexibility programs, is going to be really key to bringing your employees back and getting them to be focused and deliver their best work, which is what we all want.
Absolutely. Great. Well, let's check in with the Facebook audience and see if there are some questions coming in. We want to know your concerns, what's on your mind, and how we can be helpful in just kind of continuing the conversation.
Yeah, so the first question is from Michelle, and she asks, if you have one essential tip for how to overcome a setback, what is it?
Ooh, one essential tip.
Tip. Ooh, you want to go first?
You can go first.
Okay, let me think. Tap into your superpower. When you think about inventory, think about what your strengths are. And what have you used in the past when you've had to overcome something really, really challenging in your life? At my company, we call it our superpowers, and how do you leverage those for good? And thinking about how you can really overcome the biggest challenges. For me, again, back in 2013, being a single mom, being on one income, having two small kids, I really needed to get my financial act in order. And so I had to be really creative and solutions oriented, but I also, moving forward, it really served as a launching pad for me to try to get my financial house in order, which was great. I don't know if that answers it as eloquently as it should, but I hope that might give you some ideas.
I like that. Yeah, leveraging your strengths and finding the opportunity in it. Yeah, that's really, really good. And for me, I would just add that the setbacks that I've been through, it's been really important for me to forgive myself. So I'm a perfectionist. I have very high standards for myself. I can often be my own worst critic. And it's very easy during a challenging time to kind of blame yourself or think, I'm not doing enough. And even though we're encouraging you to make use of the time, I also believe that there's got to be an element of forgiveness of just like, this is not my fault. There's a lot that I don't have control over. You can still kind of refocus on what you do have control over, but kind of forgiving yourself for some of the imperfection or the mistakes that might happen, right? I think you mentioned like the first few days of the shutdown in 2013 were like kind of miserable.
Yeah.
Until you kind of were like, okay, let me figure something out. I mean, I would say that's a perfect opportunity to kind of forgive yourself. Like, hey, I was kind of down on my luck, right? But I'm going to bounce back. So I think that part, it feeds into ingredient number 4 about self-care. Forgiving yourself is a self-care practice. Just kind of saying, I have permission to not be perfect. I have permission to not use this time 100% productively,
Yeah.
but I'm still going to find the opportunity in it. I think it's a both and.
I like that because unstructured time can be productive time.
Yeah.
You know, if you need a nap, take a nap. Don't feel
Yeah.
bad about it.
Do what you need
Yeah.
for yourself.
Yeah. Go for a walk with your dog. You know, take your kids to the playground. Enjoy it as much as you can, albeit unstructured, albeit out of your routine, and focus on the things that you can control.
Yeah, I love that. Great. Any other questions from the Facebook community?
So, our next question is, once the shutdown ends, how can agency leaders and managers start repairing the damage done to employee engagement?
Great question. So a few ideas to kick things off. We recommend that agency leaders could hold some kind of a welcome back town hall or other meeting that convenes people to reintegrate, to get people focused back on the mission and the work. The other key part of that is expressing appreciation for the work that they do. One message that could be sent by a shutdown is, this work isn't valuable, this work is not essential, come back when we tell you to, right? So agency leaders have an opportunity to mitigate that message and bring people back, to tell them how much they do appreciate the work that they do, to reinforce the importance of the mission, maybe to even set a couple of key priorities for the kind of months ahead. But a town hall or some other kind of meeting could be very useful for that. Now, if your agency heads don't do that, although it's recommended, it's also possible for supervisors to do that, just with their team. Again, focus on what you can control. So a supervisor could convene their team over lunch, over coffee, over your regularly scheduled all-staff meeting, where you actually just, again, send that message that they are appreciated, that it's unfortunate what happened, and it's important to kind of get back to that that mission that we're all focused on. I would also leave space during that conversation to hear from them. So solicit their ideas about what do they need right now. So supervisors and agency heads don't have to feel pressure to only, lecture on the importance of the mission. I think that's part of the message. Don't forget, communication is two-way. Let's also hear from the employees about what have they been through, what do they need. There might be an element of kind of getting things off their chest, processing what has happened, so that they can more quickly get back to work. So that would be kind of an initial set of recommendations. But any other thoughts on what people can do?
I think, so a good friend of mine, Robert Goldenkopf from GAO, often says about engagement, it's not that hard. We learned it in kindergarten. Follow the golden rule. So treat your employees, your coworkers, your colleagues, your superiors the way that you would want to be treated. And put yourselves in their shoes. Have conversations. I love the focus on the mission. Look, I'm an Army soldier, ride or die. But at the end of the day, these are people's lives.
Yes.
And so be kind and be patient and follow the golden rule. There's one other element, though, I do want to hone in on. And engagement is not only on the shoulders of your leaders, your managers, your supervisors. Being engaged is also up to you. And so there's a shared concept of responsibility that has to happen. You tuning in today just shows that you're engaged and you want to understand how to better connect, and that you enjoy connecting with other federal employees, no matter where you are or when it is or what's going on in the world. So remember that you have a responsibility as well for your own engagement. And how do you find that internally when you're not able to get to work and when you are able to get back to work? I think that's a key area as well.
Yeah, and that's, again, speaks to the importance of the topic of resiliency, because that's a very personal mindset. And so I love the emphasis on the individual contributor, whether you're a supervisor or not, kind of bringing your best self back to work. It's easier said than done, but I think through some of these pointers, it's possible.
I think it is too.
All right, the next question is, how can feds manage stress when no one knows when the shutdown will end?
Yeah, I think that's the age-old question, right? And we talked about the uncertainty of and the uncertain and volatile nature of what's going on. So my pointer before was kind of the short term, medium term, and long term options. I think that's really helpful. And I'll just add one way to also mitigate stress is to get out of your own situation. Um, and Mika, you kind of talked a little bit about getting involved. I think volunteer work is an excellent way to mitigate stress because stress kind of fuels itself. If I'm stuck in my own head in my own situation and worrying about me, that's an aspect of managing stress, but it actually kind of ends up fueling the fire. If I can step out of my own selfishness for even a couple hours a day and go do some volunteer work or provide a valuable service to somebody else, like tutoring or as you were talking about, like kind of like shadowing or there's also an emphasis for like substitute teachers and things like that.
I was just going to
Yeah.
say youth. There's nothing that
It can be
bring up
paid
your
too.
spirits.
I say volunteer work, but
yeah,
it could be paid.
it could be paid. But working with youth is an amazing way to just sort of get outside of yourself and give back. And consider this. It's going to be really challenging. It already was for the future federal workforce to attract the next generation of Fed workers and Fed leaders. What if you get back to the communities? You go into the schools, you help read, you help mentor, you help maybe do substitute teaching and get paid on the side. But you're also showcasing the resiliency of yourselves as well as public servants in the communities. And so that could go a long way to help make a difference and tell the different stories that people don't get to see the other side sometimes. They see what's in the news and they see what's said about federal employees. But you can make a difference by just being involved in the community or in someone else's life in a really meaningful and important way.
Yeah.
I did also just want to remind you that some healthcare benefits can offset the costs for things like massage therapy, acupuncture, really untraditional kind of cool ways to mitigate your stress. So I really highly recommend you flip your insurance card over, call the 800 number, go on the website, ask what's available, and see if there might be some cost-effective ways for you to get some assistance with your stress, whether that be a massage, whether that be acupuncture, whether that be exercise, whether that be meditation by downloading the app, or just going on the Employee Assistance Program website and watching a webinar on how best you can mitigate and channel your stress and anxiety during this really tough time.
So it sounds like it comes down to a balance because we do want to have a focus on self-care. Self-care is of the utmost importance, especially during stressful times. And not getting so caught up in our own situation, but being able to give back to the community or to specific individuals who need help and getting outside of our own self and finding some balance, I think, with some volunteer work or other kind of purposeful employment. So it doesn't have to be volunteer, but some kind of purposeful use of our time. Balance is one of those funny words. Like it feels like, it's an achievement, but it's ever changing. So that's one of the stress-inducing parts of a partial shutdown like this is that our balance has been disrupted.
Yeah.
So you're basically trying to find a new set of balance, and that is really, really difficult. So we definitely want to acknowledge that. It's still worth seeking. It's still worth seeking that balance between kind of the self-care and what you need for yourself, as well as balancing that with finding purpose and looking at the social responsibility that we all have, even in a hard time like this. So hopefully that's helpful to answer that question. What else are we hearing from Facebook?
Okay, I think we have one more question, and that is, what can members of the public do to support federal employees?
I have an answer to that. Okay. So the Partnership for Public Service, as I mentioned, we're a nonprofit, nonpartisan organization, and we're standing with feds, and we hope that you will too. So you can use the hashtag #IStandWithFeds on your tweets to show appreciation for federal employees. And then we also have a Facebook profile frame that you can add. Part of this is social momentum, right? And recognizing and having our leaders far and wide recognize the importance of federal employees. We will feel it personally, but then also the message is received in the larger public. So that's one small thing that everyone can do today is to send out any kind of a message personally or via social media with the hashtag #IStandWithFeds.
I love that. I did that, in fact. And so if you go to my Twitter handle, you can see that I posted the badge myself, both on LinkedIn and Twitter. In fact, I told your social media team how much I loved that.
Yeah.
And I think it's really important. I also love the fact that not only are ourselves as federal employees, well, I'm not a federal employee anymore, but I always consider myself a public service passionista.
Yeah.
But we support one another, and so does the community. I have friends. My friend Kathleen actually started a Cash App to get donations from folks across LinkedIn and social media platforms who are supporters of federal employees to donate grocery cards and gas cards. There are those online Facebook resources that you mentioned where people are sharing resources in the community. People are donating diapers to people that have young infants. It's just been an incredible thing to see. And so there are ways to connect with resources in the community that are willing to help outside of the official ones that we know of. If you need help and if you need resources, I suggest tapping into your social media networks. I've seen a lot on the hashtag shutdown, a lot on the hashtag furloughed feds. You'll be able to find resources and connect with them, and I can help you as well. I'd be happy to if you find me on LinkedIn, point you in the right direction. I know people that are also working with like the Chief Warrant Officers Association at the Coast Guard to channel donations all around the country to federal employees who need help with groceries and some essentials until their next paycheck.
Great. That's awesome. Well, thank you so much for tuning in today, and the support that you're providing to each other, and the work that you do for the federal government. So even though we're engaged in a partial shutdown, the work that you do matters. And the Partnership for Public Service really wants to make that known, that the service that federal workers provide is essential, whether you're furloughed or not. And so we look forward to the opportunity for folks to re-engage in their missions, to get back to work. And now more than ever is the time when we really need to recognize federal employees. So I'll use that as an opportunity to remind you that our Service to America medals nominations are open right now. We've extended the deadline, and the new deadline is January 28th, so that you can submit your nominations for the SAMMys, as we like to call them. The Service to America medals recognize outstanding federal employees across the country who are doing fabulous work, whether they're at work right now or not. And so we want to make sure that that message gets out, because that is where we can actually show such appreciation for federal employees. Mika, anything you want to say to close things out?
Well, just know we salute you. We stand behind you. We're incredibly proud of you, and we empathize with your situation. You have a lot of people in your corner, and when you get back to work, we're still here to help support. So thank you for your service, and thank you for your time.
Thank you so much for your engagement today. On behalf of the Partnership for Public Service, and I want to thank Mika Cross from Flex Jobs, we're signing out. Thanks.